Sherry, there's a lot said about becoming an attraction agent, but to become an attraction agent, that requires a lot of profile marketing.
Yes, no, I agree. And I think as much as everyone wants to be an attraction agent, the reality is that you actually need to get there first. So I think, the first thing you need to do is actually just build up that profile by hard work and by creating, raving mad fans. And then once you've got raving mad fans and they start to give you referrals and then it all starts to come together, and then you start to make money so that you can actually, post on the internet and those sorts of things.
So is it like building blocks? You just start with one, you make the best thing, you do the best you can with that, then you build on it?
Yes, and I think people look at, what they want to do in a year. I don't look at it that way. I'm actually very focused on 3 months, and I use each individual property, I guess, as you talk about, as a block to actually get to the next step, to get to the next step, to get to the next step. So it is very, very specific.
You work in an office that's got some pretty high-profile operators. In fact, some of the best high-profile operators in Brisbane or Queensland, maybe even Australia, who knows? But how do you stand out in that environment? Why would someone come to your office and list with you?
Yeah, you are right. I do work in a remarkable office. And if I may, that's probably one of the reasons why I want to work there, because I actually want to be in an environment where people want to be the best at their craft, and we all want to have that high-performance mentality. I am truly blessed to work in that environment. But I suppose at the end of the day, if I'm coming up against somebody else high profile in my office, quite often what we'll do, rather than fight each other for it, we'll actually just join forces and we'll go for it ourselves. So I think our office has a very different atmosphere to most other real estate agencies, where we're not actually fighting each other. We're actually do genuinely want the best for each other.
Sherry, how important has social media been to you in building your profile?
Well, that's really been a foundation, I suppose, to my business. So I get at least a lead a day from Facebook. Now, some of them may not be my preferred leads, but the reality is that if I'm not able to work it, I might be able to refer it to somebody else in my office or another agency. So I think it is absolutely fantastic. Yeah,
and of course video's given us that opportunity to actually show a lot more personality in what we do. Do you use that in your communication?
Yeah, look, I do. I love video, and I do see the relevance, and I do very strongly believe in video. So as soon as I list a property, I literally do the 30-second, hold my phone up or my iPad up. And it's really funny, people love those videos. The professional ones, I always get a couple of likes, but I get lots of shares for these 30-second videos that I do. And it's really funny, I literally stand up there, I do one take, and I'm back in the car and I'm kind of running off.
Sure.
But the amount of people that might call me up and say, oh, Sherry, I don't know if you realise, but you said "and" there a few times, or so people are actually really watching,
critiquing you.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's kind of great. But I'll run into somebody in the street and they'll sort of say to me, hi Sherry, how you going? I'm like, great, I haven't seen you in ages. And they said, well, I feel like I see you all the time because I watch your videos. So I know that they're actually being used. One of the property that I sold earlier this year, the video was actually shared and I got an offer from somebody else's database, I suppose, on Facebook, which is powerful.
You use video also for seller feedback, don't you?
Yes, I do. So as soon as I finish an open home, I do send a video to my buyers, but I also do send one to sellers as well, because then I'm in the car, they're dying to find out what happened at the open home, and I don't necessarily have a moment to give them a call at that time. Sometimes, I might need to call somebody hot back from an open home 1 or 2 before, but they know that I'm going to get back to them that day, but they've got an immediate response ready to go.
Those videos you do for buyers who come to open homes, are they done for every individual buyer?
Not every buyer, but obviously if somebody has come to a few of my open homes that day, they will actually be more specific, because it's clear that they're a qualified buyer who's ready to go now.
And what do you say to them?
I just generally thank them for their time and for coming through, and see if they have any further interest to give me a call, and letting them know when I'm going to be in contact furthermore.
Have you got a script for that, or is that just done off the cuff?
Well, we do it a lot, so I guess we've kind of become a little bit programmed, but no, it's done off the cuff.
Hello once again and welcome to the show. Well, it would appear that compared to the rest of the country, Sydney might be in for a busy Easter weekend. Back in a moment with Geoff and all the details.
Tall people. Constantly making the world a better place.
There you go.
And how does the world reward you? Stretch out with up to 40% more legroom in Economy X on Virgin Australia.
And once again, we welcome into the show Geoff White from CoreLogic. Hi, Geoff.
G'day, Kevin. How are you?
Very well, mate. A nice early happy Easter to you too. I hope you have a nice time with the family over the weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. It's hard to believe it's Easter, and it's even later this year. It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and the year is really galloping away.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, as I said in the intro there, we'll have a look at the Sydney auction numbers shortly, but firstly, let's have a look back over the last week, and Sydney's clearance rate actually tops the country, Geoff.
Yeah, that's right. Sydney did come up from 54.9 to 55.8, so it saw a rise and even a rise in the numbers. So from 929 auctions, 55.8. That's a pretty solid performance based on the fact that the numbers had come up as well. By contrast, whilst Melbourne's numbers were up a bit as well to 941, it dropped from 55.4 down to 51.6. So we saw a fall in Melbourne, which was greater than the rise in Sydney. It's interesting to note Brisbane too. I think that's had a good week as well. 39% from 136. That was 25.9 the week before. So good rise there. Adelaide 50.8 from 150 auctions, and they were 48.2. So we saw a bit of a rise in Adelaide. Perth 25.9 from 39. They'd fallen a couple of percent. And Canberra 51.4 from 78, and they'd come back a bit from 58.2. So there's been some ups and downs, but certainly Sydney led the way this week, and a good performance with the number of auctions it had.
Mm. Okay, we'll take you to the Sydney sub-regions now, and North Sydney and Hornsby, 58%, almost 60% on 153 auctions, although Inner West also at 70% on a lesser number of auctions though.
Yeah, but still that's pretty good, 101 auctions and still 70%, so that's well above the Sydney clearance rate. And a solid number of auctions. Yeah, North Sydney, Hornsby, as you say, a terrific number of auctions and again a clearance rate that's higher than the Sydney clearance rate, so that looked good. And the eastern suburbs, 58.3 with 146 is good as well. Again, city inner south, nearly 60%, 59.1 from 117. So there's some really good numbers there. I'm seeing a little bit more consistency with the Sydney ones. A lot more in those 50s, not as erratic. I know we've got some down lower and some a little bit higher, but it just looking very consistent, which means that the overall Sydney market is performing reasonably well, I'd say there, Kevin.
Mm. Yeah, well, it's really going to be interesting to see what happens over the weekend. I think, a couple of hundred auctions, which we'll bring up for you in a moment out of Sydney over the weekend. So it will be really interesting to track that. Let's take you to the Melbourne sub-regions now. And yes, still a somewhat disappointing result out of Melbourne.
Yeah, it did come back a bit. We're seeing some of those certainly the inner south, where there was 141 auctions, has dipped under the 50%. But again, this sort of market, it's a bit up and down. Just depends on the week. In a couple of weeks' time, we could be talking about that being in the mid-50s. It can change that much. So inner east, just smack bang on 50%. That's been a bit of a yardstick one we've been focusing on. But the inner Melbourne still very strong with 205 auctions and 57.3.
That's strong.
So that's a very strong result there. We've seen even the West is this week 52.3 from 133. So yeah, it just chops and changes a bit, and probably less consistent in Melbourne this week compared to others, whereas Sydney, I think, is a bit more consistent. So that's the difference, perhaps. Yeah.
Well, good sign. It's a good sign, I do think. I mean, Sydney's still the peak market for auctions. As we're going to see the auctions this week, we'll bring that graphic up for you now. 220 out of Sydney. Does that surprise you, Geoff? Is it down on Easter last year?
Last year we had 670 nationally, so this year 386. So the overall number is down and Sydney's down. They're all down. But that's still a pretty reasonable number for Sydney in total comparison to the 386. So it's got the lion's share of auctions, which is if you track the Easter weeks going back, Sydney tends to hold more auctions than Melbourne, which, funny enough, so and very much so the case this week,
no, it'll be interesting. That'll be something we can certainly measure, and there will be some top properties we'll tell you about. Our broadcast, just a reminder too, that's going to be at the end of the weekend, will be on Tuesday as opposed to Monday. We'll just give it a little bit more time to get those figures together. And we'll have that for you on Tuesday, the final auction results. It will be really interesting. Just before we go too, Geoff, I just wanted to bring up my favourite slide, the worm. It really is. It's interesting to watch this, and I get a bit of a kick. I probably wouldn't want to feature it if it was actually if the worm was going further down.
No, that's right. It would be less appealing, that's correct.
It would be for me, yeah.
Yeah, but no, look, it's one to look because it looks at the weekly clearance rate and then the 4-week average. And I think we can sometimes get carried away from a week to week. It's up this week, down next week, whatever.
Yep.
Whereas if you look at it over a 4-week period, you start to see the trends. And this shows the trend. And the trend is certainly heading north. And it's a question of how far north it'll go over a period of time. And it might hover in that sort of early 50s for a while, I think, there, Kevin, until, a lot of things are off our plate, like the federal election and so on. So,
going to be, it'll be good to watch that. And remembering, too, that this is the clearance rate that we're looking at here as opposed to the number of auctions. So, fingers crossed we could still have over 50% result from this coming week. So we'll tell you all about that on Tuesday when Geoff and I will come back. Geoff White, of course, from CoreLogic. CoreLogic supplying all of the data for us every week for our auction update shows. Geoff, all the best, my friend. Enjoy your time over Easter, and I look forward to talking to you early next week.
You too, Kevin, and have a good break, and all the best. Thank you.
Evening, Clara. Home, please.
David, what's on your mind?
I was just thinking of a different time is all. It was a time when I used to sit up there, Driving wasn't just about being taken from place to place, but going somewhere. Feeling something along the way.
Please, David. You should relax.
I'm afraid that's just the problem.
David, where are you going? David?